Hey everyone, this is my video on recommendations and tips for new Dodge Viper owners. So you've gone out, you've done your research, you've purchased your first Dodge Viper. What do you need to know and what should you do? My recommendations before you start to drive the car, there's a few things you want to look at and take care of. Number one, check your tire condition. With your tires, you're looking for two things. You're looking for the tread depth of the tire, which is usually a minimum of 230 seconds is the DOT recommendation, as well as the age of the tires. There's usually a 4-digit code on the tires. The first two numbers are the week it was manufactured, and the last two are the year. So if they're more than 7 years old, they will lose a considerable amount of their gripping capabilities, and you should go ahead and replace them, as long as just looking for any sort of general tire damage on the tires, as you would look at with any car. Also, pull your wheels and tires off. Look at your suspension and your steering components. Check your ball joints, your tie rod ends. Make sure there's no excessive play, there's no damage. Make sure everything is in good working condition so the car will behave as it was designed to behave. Also, check your brakes. Make sure your rotors are in good condition. There's no warping on them. Make sure your pads have an acceptable amount of depth to the pads. Again, this is your investment. Do your homework, check this stuff. Make sure you're protecting yourself and your investment. Also, check your drivetrain. Make sure there's no leaks in your drivetrain, your differential, your engine, your transmission. Make sure there's no drips, there's no leaks, there's no damage to any components. And just do a good visual inspection. That will usually give you a good idea of the overall condition of the car. Also, for new first-time Viper owners, for the second-gen cars, and also the first-gen cars as well, for opening the hood, you have an external latch. This is your primary latch. This brings the hood up a little bit. This is your secondary latch. This brings the hood up a little more. Then you have to go around to the front of the hood. Ideally, 2 people. If you only have one, you can do it by yourself. Just grab the center of the hood. And very slowly, very gently lift the hood. This is a very expensive, very big hood. It will flex considerably when it comes out of the catches. So just be very careful with the hood. I said this in my other videos, but you really don't want to especially damage the hood on this car. So you've got the hood open for the first time. You're checking everything. To give yourself peace of mind and just to know that everything has been done, I recommend changing all the fluids and filters under the hood. They're not hard to do. They're not expensive. If you're mechanically inclined and you work on regular cars, you can do it on this car. Unless the previous owner has extensive paperwork showing that the fluids have been done, I would recommend doing it. Most people neglect these cars. They don't change the fluids when they're supposed to. They don't do them in the proper intervals. One thing that I use as a good guide to know if the fluids were changed, I will look at the brake master cylinder. If the fluid in here is dark brown or black, then that means that they probably haven't changed this fluid. And brake fluid is pretty cheap and pretty easy to change. So if they haven't done the brake fluid, odds are they haven't done any of them. So if the fluid is that dark of a color, it's probably been years since it's been done, and it means it's been neglected. So the other fluids have probably been neglected as well. So start off the good baseline, change everything so you know 100% for sure that all the fluids are done, and that the car can be safely driven without having to worry about problems arising from lack of maintenance. Also, check the bulbs on the car. Make sure your headlights are working. Make sure your taillights are working, your turn signals. Again, for your safety, just make sure everything is in good working order. If you didn't have a PPI done or you didn't inspect that when you looked at the car in person. When you want to close the hood on the car, just the same reverse procedure. Ideally, you want to grab the center. If you can, 2 people is the best. Slowly close the hood. You don't want to slam the hood on any car, especially a car like this. So bring it down nice and slow. You'll start to feel it engage the catches. The rollers on the top will begin to roll into place. And the hood comes down. These pieces should be level. You want to be real careful, especially when you're new with a Viper, before you kind of get the feel of where the hood should be. You'll see this catch in here has to grab. As I bring it down a little bit more, it'll start to go into place. Unfortunately, you're almost always going to have handprints on the front of the hood because you have to use your hands to close it. So what I usually do is I'll bring it down a little bit, and you'll feel it start to engage the rollers. You're still level here, and you can see in there that the top and bottom catches have locked onto each other. That means everything's lined up. We're ready to close the hood. One hand flat here, one hand flat here. The hood's locked. You can give it a test tug, make sure it's good, because the two latches are at the front of the hood that actually hold the hood closed. So both sides should be nice and level. The hood is properly closed. Let's go inside the car and go over a couple recommendations and things I recommend to people. If you're driving the car with the windows down, the windows do rattle if the windows are all the way down. If you put the window all the way down, it disappears and you don't see it at all. You can see my window sticks out a little bit here. I leave that up just a hair like that so it keeps it from rattling. That's another Viper recommendation. When you're getting in the car, there is quite a bit of adjustability. You have your knob adjustment down here for adjusting your pedal depth. You have your lever here for adjusting the tilt of the steering wheel. There is a lever here that lets the seat come forward. Check the pouch in the back. A lot of times there's original paperwork back there that people forgot to take out. There's also a lever to move the seat forward, and there is a bulb for adjusting the lumbar support. So there is a fair amount of adjustability. If you're a very tall person, usually 6'3", 6'4", there are lowering kits available for these seats that will lower the car about 2 inches, give or take. So if you're pretty tall, you can still drive this car comfortably with the seat lowering kit. It's not an issue. They're fairly easy to install, and they are readily available. I also recommend keeping a microfiber towel with the car at all times. Whether you have handprints on the hood or you're getting gas and you spill gas on the side of it, there's nothing worse than trying to clean something quickly off the car and not have any sort of towel to clean it off with. Keep the microfiber towel in the car. It'll save you if you ever need it in a pinch. This car has a skip shift on it. That was mandated by the federal government from the EPA, meaning when you start off with the car in first gear, when you get up to about 1,500 RPMs, a small up yellow arrow will appear, which forces you to go from first into fourth gear. It locks second and third out. If you go to about 2,000 RPMs, that light will go off and you can shift the car normally. They all had this. This was a government mandate, so all the Vipers of this generation had that skip shift on it. There are skip shift eliminators available you can plug in that just overrides it, but it's not that bad to deal with, so I left mine on the car. It doesn't really bother me. This is the stock stereo of the car. The stereo is only a single CD changer. The clock runs pretty fast in these things, so if you like to have a accurate clock, you're going to have to adjust it probably once every month or two just to keep it accurate. If you want to program your stereo presets, you go to the channel that you want, hold the button for a few seconds until it blinks, and then press it again. That locks it in. In regards to the climate controls, this is where a lot of new owners get really panicked the first time they tried to use the HVAC system. This car has a very small dashboard on it, so they couldn't route the heat and the air conditioning out of all the vents like they could in a normal car. So the heat only comes out of the floor vents by your feet, and the ambient temperature or the air conditioning only come out of these 3 top vents, as well as the cooler on the bottom on the passenger side and the driver's side. So if you're driving the car for the first time, you turn your heat all the way up, you put it on the upper setting, and you're turning the fan up. You're like, wait, what's going on? Why is there no heat coming out of here? You think the HVAC system's broken. Relax. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with the car. It's not broken. Only air conditioning comes out of these top vents, as well as the outside air temperature. So that is normal. If you do set the heat to the top vents, nothing's going to happen. Same thing if you set the AC to the lower vents, nothing's going to happen. That's normal with these cars. Also, the mirrors will move quite a bit when you're driving, so you'll notice that you'll set your mirror to where you want it. You'll drive a little bit, maybe take it out for a couple drives. Now you're noticing your mirrors are not where you left them. They didn't get hit. That's just they move and they rattle a little bit. I don't know if the non-electric motor mirror cars do it, but the cars that have the electric ones, they definitely do. So you will have to periodically just adjust the mirrors. It's just something that happens to all these Vipers. It's fairly normal. The security immobilizer is in this small glove box in here. I went over this in my buyer's guide video. If you open the hood or the trunk, when the alarm is activated, you have to go in there, put the ignition key in, turn a quarter turn, and take it out. that will disable the security system so you can start the car normally. All right, also the mechanical pulls for the doors are here. The electronics fail, you have to open the rear glass, reach through here, and pull this. Also an emergency if they fail for whatever reason. If you have an RT10, the small window behind the simulated roll bar, there is a special key to drop that window and to reach inside. So GTS guys, you have the struts on the back glass. RT10s don't have struts, they just have a little stand that holds the trunk up. These will start to go bad over time, just as they do in pretty much all cars, and they won't really hold the glass up still. You just have to replace them. They're easy to do. I replace these. They're fairly simple. And your spare tire is down here. It's basically a small donut. It's the same diameter as the other tires, but it's really skinny, so I wouldn't recommend driving with it on for really at all if you can avoid it. Also, your jack and your levers down there. So, all right, so we've gone over some of the basic stuff with the car. When you start driving the car, what you really need to know is take it easy with this car. This car is not like any other cars. Even if you've driven fast cars in the past, there's a lot of things, there's a big learning curve on this car to kind of get a feel for it and understanding the characteristics about it. This car has a reputation for being a monster, an animal. You know, this car wants to kill you. It has a reputation because people get in these things and they really don't know what these cars are about. They don't understand the power that these cars have before they go out and they really push these cars and they end up crashing them. You don't want to end up on wrecked exotics. Another Viper owner would have crashed Viper. That's why there's so many of these wrecked, because people were driving these cars that shouldn't be driving them. This car has diesel level torque. It's an 8-liter V10. The car makes torque everywhere. This car has no problem breaking the tires loose in first gear, second gear, even third gear. If you're heavy into the throttle, even if you're well into second gear, you have traction, as the engine picks up speed, the tires can start to break loose again, because as the horsepower builds, it can break the tires loose again. Since the torque is available all the time, but the horsepower does build very, very quickly in this car. So just remember, you have a lot of torque underneath your foot at all times, and it can break the wheels loose if you're not careful and you really don't understand the characteristics and the nature of this car. Also, getting back in the car, monitor, especially when the car is new, monitor your temperature in this car. These cars can overheat. They do overheat, especially if they're not maintained. Here's your oil pressure gauge. Oil pressure should be around 50 to 60 pounds. That's fairly normal. In regards to your temperature, this small hash here, just before 250, that is the maximum normal operating temperature per Chrysler Corporation. The engine temperature should never go past that very small hash mark before the 250 line. That is the absolute max temperature. I think it's 217 degrees, and that's getting pretty hot. When you're driving the car, even on warm days, the engine should usually sit around the third bold hash mark above the 190 setting. That's when you're moving. The car will heat up a little bit if you're sitting in traffic, especially when it's hot outside. This car usually goes just past the third bold hash mark by the 190, and then it comes right back. That is normal operating temperature. Like I said, it will fluctuate if it's hot outside and you're sitting in traffic, you got the air conditioning going. It'll fluctuate a little bit. You will hear the fan kick on, and usually the temperature drops down. But when the car is new to you and you're not familiar with it, monitor your temperature to make sure that the car is operating in the correct range. Again, that small hash mark is maximum temperature under normal conditions. If you start going past that, pull the car over the side of the road, turn it off, and open the hood. Don't risk damaging your car to, I'll be home in 5 minutes. Is it really worth causing catastrophic engine failure to save, yourself towing the car if it's that bad? In my opinion, it's not. So protect yourself, protect your investment. Don't throw the dice. It's not worth it. This car has never overheated on me because I always check that. I make sure that the car's operating in normal temperature. So you should do the same thing. Get a feel for the steering and the suspension on this car. The suspension is, some people say it has a very unique feeling the way the car handles, as really do most cars, but it's going to have its own special feel, and you need to get used to it before you start to really throw this car into turns and really start to get close to the limits of this car. Also get a feel for the brakes. Any Viper made from 2000 and before does not have ABS. So the proportioning of the non-ABS cars is well known for being very off, and the front brakes tend to lock up before the backs do. So a lot of owners have crashed these things, partially because threshold braking is very difficult in these cars. So if you're not familiar with how the brakes feel, be careful, get a feel for them before you go out and you really start to push this car. Also, I recommend don't drive this car in the rain or the snow. You can, absolutely, but there's no traction control in this car. It's much harder to drive in wet or snow conditions. Most people won't do it, but I have seen some people do it. I would not recommend it. This car can be a handful enough in the dry if you're pushing it. So even trying to drive this car around in the inclement weather can be difficult as it is. So I wouldn't recommend doing it. If you absolutely need to, if you're out somewhere and it starts to rain, sometimes there's nothing you can do, but just be very careful. There's a lot of power that goes to those back. Even though the back tires are 13 inches wide, there's a lot of power going to them. And I've had this car break loose on me in dry conditions when I wasn't even trying to push the car, and it broke loose a little bit on me and sort of surprised me, even when I had this car for a while. So this car can surprise you. Even when you think you kind of have it dialed in, it can throw you a curveball when you're not expecting it. So again, there are a lot of crash Vipers for a reason. Take it easy when you're a new Viper owner. I don't care if you've driven other fast cars before. I don't care if you've driven Ferraris or Porsches. This car has different characteristics than those type of cars. This car has a ton of power down low. It has a ton of power up high. And if you don't respect this car, you're going to end up on wrecked exotics like a lot of other owners standing on the side of the road with a car that's destroyed. So protect yourself, protect your investment. Don't be stupid. Until you really understand how this car behaves and how it acts, don't bury the throttle. It's worth it just to take a little bit extra time to get a good feel for this car and understand how it behaves. I hope this helped any sort of new owners kind of know the little ins and outs of this car. Thanks for watching.